Good morning. I'm here again with another episode of Searching the Heart. We'll get right straight into it. And today we'll be considering something interesting. The theology of engineering and leadership. The theology of engineering and leadership. Well, these are two separate topics, theology of engineering and then the theology of leadership. But I just want to merge them together so that we can have a very clear path to what we want to talk about. Now, of course, engineering is that thing we think is a modern occupation. But those who are engaged in it know how important it is to society and to help society thrive and to develop. And today I've decided to concentrate on it because, of course, if you have followed my past episodes, I have opened one or two, been able to highlight one or two issues as concerns engineering that are taking humanity, to the next frontier. Now, it's not just engineering. We have many other fields involved, like anthropology itself, human development, and it actually contains everything that has to do with humanity. And but engineering is very vital, and we will be looking at it in this episode of Searching the Heart. Now, there are two words we need to understand, and number one is theology. A lot of people are intimidated when they hear the word theology, and because rightly so, because they're talking about God. In fact, one of the first lessons you learn in a theological class is that you cannot actually study God. Of course, theology means the study of God. Okay? You cannot actually study God because the very concept of God is beyond human understanding. And so to say one is studying God is somewhat of a fallacy of sorts. And of course, theology deals with the question, is there a God? And if so, what is he like? Why did he create human beings? Did he create human beings, and why? How does he solve human problems? Is he interested in solving human problems? And how does he do it? Now, that is theology itself. And so, we will now start looking at trying to answer some of these problems. We're not going to go to completely deal with, because of the time we have in this podcast, we're not going to deal with all these questions. But we're going to limit ourselves to that topic, the theology of engineering. Okay? So when we look at, we're going to be going through one description, of course, from the Christian point of view, of what theology is all about. And of course, the theology of engineering. And when we study the Christian Bible, we see 5 basic things. First of all, the God that is described by the Christian Bible created a world and then put human beings in this world. Of course, he created a world that can sustain human life and then created human life on top of every other form of organism, animals, birds, insects, microorganisms. And he put human beings in charge of all these things, and the Bible says it very clearly. In fact, the Bible goes ahead to also add that he not only created human beings, but he created them naked, without clothes. It's very, very unique that the Bible actually draws a very clear distinction in some of these issues. And it says, okay, God then provided clothes for human beings to wear. At a certain point, when they had grown up. It makes us understand that they were like infants and so did not mind being naked. But at a point in time, their eyes opened and he had to make clothes for them to cover their nakedness. Now this is the first point at which God tries to solve human problems. Not only by providing food, but by clothing human beings. That is how engineering started. Secondly, he began to teach them to do things for themselves. Now, before I go to the next point, in which engineering takes a front burner, you discover that after making clothes for human beings began to innovate by themselves, building houses, building musical instruments, and tools for farming. And this is clearly stated in the Bible, in the book of Genesis, for that matter. And then the next very important step in which we see engineering being becoming a factor is when God taught human beings to build shipping technology. The first ship was built by a man called Noah, following the directions given to him by God. Now this is very important. Number 4 of how we see this God intervening in human society, and especially through engineering, is teaching people how to create a sustainable economy and polity through technology. And some of these ways he did this was establishing, architectural structures that they used to administer government, like the tabernacle. There was something called the Ark of the Covenant. You may have heard of the conspiracy theories about where the Ark of the Covenant is. That was a golden box that contained some of the historical artifacts of the Israelites. And of course, the tabernacle was the forerunner to the temple, which today we know is a very contentious building. So he created these systems to help them create an economy and a government. And the 5th one is teaching them the art of sacrifice. Now this is the only thing he did that had real spiritual significance in helping the Israelites. Of course, he did other things that were moral in nature, like giving them the 10 Commandments. Of course, the 10 Commandments were hewn on tablets of stone. They needed to understand engineering to carve out such tablets of stone. Up to today, we still have ceramics, tiles used in buildings, and that was a type of tile that was used to hewn in the 10 Commandments. Of course, those were all moral actions, governmental actions. But teaching them the art of sacrifice in the coming of Jesus Christ to die on the cross was the final and possibly only true theological act that the God of the Bible did for human beings. And out of 5 major theological moves that God enabled them to do, God did for them, only one was purely spiritual in nature. And this is very interesting, and that builds a foundation for us to understand who the God of the Bible is and how he acts in human society. That is interesting, isn't it? To discover that God's major moves, as described by the Bible, were all acts of engineering. All acts of engineering. First, from creation to making clothes for the people, to teaching them shipping technology, to teaching them how to create a stable polity through structures, buildings, educational structures, and finally, the only spiritual act, the act of sacrifice, by bringing Jesus Christ to die on the cross. So it is very interesting to see how God really acts in human society. So why? The question you want to ask yourself is, why is engineering such an important endeavor? Why is it such an important endeavor? I have just penned down a few reasons and a few things we can observe in the science of engineering. Engineering is visionary and practical. That is the reason it is so important. It is visionary and practical. And what does this mean? That means engineering does not just solve the problems of the present, which are important, like hunger, like shelter, healthcare, which are practical reasons for engaging engineering, but it also solves the problems of the future. And this is one thing we actually look down on. We don't really think about. We are so interested in, filling our stomachs, that we are not hungry today, that we are not homeless today. But we forget about the future. And one very important function of engineering is protecting the future. And so engineering is very, very theological. Of course, we know that theology is about the future, about the salvation of humanity, the spiritual salvation of humanity. And this is what engineering shares with theology, protecting the future. If you are not alive, you cannot be saved. If you cannot live from day to day, you cannot be saved. God is not a God of confusion. He didn't create the human beings to live for a day and then die. Because salvation is a process. That is one thing you also learn when you go to theological school. Salvation is a process. And so, engineering protects that future to ensure that there is a roof over our heads. There is a myth that is being told about Cain in the Bible. Cain, who killed his brother. That Cain actually died because a building he built fell on his head. Okay? Poor engineering. Okay? He died from a fallen building. So engineering protects that future. Is visionary. It is practical and it is visionary. That is the function of engineering. Engineering is sacrificial because it involves hard work. Hard work. It is difficult. Many people run away from engineering because it is difficult. I am not one of them. I was not a very good mathematician, neither very good in physics, but I wanted to do engineering because I had a flair for it. I had the passion for it. And I went for it even though it was very difficult. I studied for 5 years until I changed my major and decided to study theology instead. But very few of us have that guts to go for something that is difficult. And so we need to develop that. It is not natural, but we need to develop that. Hard work is not natural. And one challenge that human beings need to develop is hard work, because that is what gets things done. Imagine if Jesus had given up in the Garden of Gethsemane. Okay, he prayed and prayed to God. So if it is your will, let this cup pass over me. But he was brave enough to face the cross. Hard work, engineering involves hard work. And hence it is sacrificial. You sacrifice sometimes even the money that you might get and put it into research. You sacrifice time that you will spend doing other things in developing things that will benefit us for the future. People like Isaac Newton, people like Galileo, and many of those people never benefited from the technologies they invented. It was generations after them that really benefited from this technology. So engineering is sacrificial. Engineering provides physical and financial security. Without security, you cannot eat the food that you produce. These are the things that some people experience every day. Some of us are experiencing, especially in Nigeria these days. In places like Ethiopia, there's always grain scarcity because of lack of peace. In Ukraine, so all these things are signs that without security you cannot enjoy the things you need and you want, and engineering helps to provide this security. Of course, the negatives are the arms race. Of course, those are the negatives that of course affect us as human beings. The abuse of engineering. Well, engineering provides physical and financial security through housing, through development of financial systems, that help to provide this security. And that is why in Genesis chapter 22 verse 14, God is described as Jehovah Jireh. That's Jehovah who provides. God who provides. Jehovah Jireh. And we're going to be looking very closely at this very concept because it is of much importance to us. So, we've looked at the reason engineering is so important. That God worked using engineering to secure human beings and to save human beings. And we'll be going to one of the important points that really affects us in this very generation. And I was able to look at Genesis 22 verse 14. God as Jehovah Jireh, the God who provides for us. And engineering is the tool through which He provides for us. We need to look very closely at what happened in Genesis 22 verse 14. When you start Genesis chapter 22, you will see a situation where God commanded Abraham, his servant, to take his only son and sacrifice on an altar to God Himself. This was a son Abraham had waited for years and years. And Abraham had this son, Isaac, when he was 95 years of age, very old. And normally no man will be able to give birth at that age. But Abraham had Isaac at that age. And God told him, go and sacrifice this son. The Bible describes to us that this was a test for Abraham to see if Abraham was committed to God. If Abraham would give back to God what God had given him. Now this story ends with God actually stopping Abraham from sacrificing Isaac and then providing a lamb that was stuck in the bush for Abraham to sacrifice instead. And that is where Abraham understood one of God's names. And God's name was Jehovah Jireh, the God that provides. And so Abraham saw and experienced God as Jehovah Jireh. And this is very important in understanding this point number 4 that I will be talking about today. Engineering removes the proliferation of child leadership. engineering removes the proliferation of child leadership. Today in the third world, or in the less developed world, one of the problems we face is child leadership. Children in mines, children as the primary tool for agricultural development, children as even decision makers in homes. Engineering removes this abuse of children. Children are supposed to be learning, not making leadership decisions, not providing for their families. And this is a problem that we face in the developing world. And whether it is done by the poor in the farms and on the streets, or done by the rich on our TV sets and in government offices, it is the same thing. And there is this growing mentality, that when we put a person that looks like a child on a TV screen, it will raise sympathy for our pet project. So engineering helps to stop this kind of behavior, because it provides such that these children are left alone to study and to build their minds and become the leaders they are supposed to be, leaders in the future. And Genesis chapter 22 is a foundation for this. God helped Abraham to understand that God is not interested in human nor child sacrifice. God is not interested in this. And that is why he sent his only son, Jesus Christ, and who sacrificed himself when he was old enough, 33 years of age. And because he was the one who had the position and the responsibility to do that, to save human beings. And so this is what we see. This is a very, very important concept. And we need to really look at it very closely. We see a situation in Africa today where children are put forward as a reason why leadership has to do this or do that, or imbibe one policy or the other, as a reason to look for funds, maybe to provide for such children. And yet, this is done because of the very fact that these leaders themselves are corrupt and are stealing the future of these children by not providing those resources they need, by subsidizing education, by putting funds in research and development, so that these children don't have to be used in this way. We need to speak against this. We need to work against this. The consumer culture has created a situation and a sort of reason and moral backing for our failures. And most of the time I look at so many documentaries and what I see children being put on the screen, and they are taught to lie and to form a contextual basis for whatever development or developmental strategy that is being imbibed. But the truth is that most of the time we innovate not only because we want to fill our bellies today and because we want to have shelter on our heads today, but because we are trying to protect the next 20 years so that the children that come then don't have to go to the farm. The children that come then don't have to go into the mines, because the technology would have been provided for them, so that they will learn innocently as they are and not be forced to lose their innocence because they become the leaders of that day. we have looked at so many things and explored how engineering affects our lives, and how it affects also our theology, our understanding of who God is. Now we'll look at another subtopic within the theology of leadership, because we have come to understand that engineering is leadership, and is a very important factor in leadership. Understanding the role engineering plays and how we can develop the study of engineering as leaders and not avoid it. Okay, so one problem we have also in the developing world, especially in Africa, is that we have not yet reached that point where we bask in human creativity. We are still basking in humanity itself, rather than basking in what humanity can bring forth. Okay, that is why we are so much into religion and all those things. But humanity as a collective has gone far beyond that, and we need to really understand this, and so that we can solve the problems that face us in form of poverty and the conflicts that are proliferated on the African continent. So now we are going into the theology of leadership, and we are considering two people, two historical figures that played a part in leadership. And these two people are Robert Hutchins and John Dewey. Okay, and these, when you read my book, The Kingdom of Heaven on Earth, you will see a brief discussion on these two people. And these two people are educationists. And Robert Hutchins was of the view that education is to prepare people for life. Okay? That when you are educating someone, you are educating that person for his entire lifespan, to prepare him for every challenge he will face in life. And that is what education should be for. And then, of course, this is reasonable and this is natural. And it is true. But John Dewey, on the other hand, was of the opinion that education is to prepare people for a job. He was more interested in the day-to-day runnings of the economy, and so that people will be educated to fill up roles in the different sectors in the economy, and so move the machine of economy. Now, these two people are not totally wrong, but the issue we need to understand here is that it is in the emphasis that we find a dichotomy. And because of this, John Dewey created a system, a hierarchical structure, in which there is a mentoring, okay, a kind of a chain mentoring, and instructions are passed from the very top of that pyramidal hierarchy right down to the base. This was what separated John Dewey from Robert Hutchins, and it is understood that John Dewey controls most of modern education today, the principles that he thought out. Of course, we don't have time to look at the complete every detail of these two different points of view, but this is it. But let us look a little at the issues concerned. Now, we must understand that Robert Hutchins is not saying that people will not work and earn a living. No, this is not what Robert Hutchins is saying. I'm sure Robert Hutchins also believed that people needed to be trained for specific jobs. But his emphasis for Hutchins was that people would be better trained to be able to solve problems of life rather than just for a job. And Hutchins, number two also, is that Hutchins provides a vital balance that we need between formal and the informal sector. This is one thing that people fail to realize, that Hutchins provides a very vital balance needed between the formal and the informal sectors. And we know that in Africa, a very large percentage of our people are involved in the informal sector. And mostly the crisis is actually in that sector. Like today I was watching a video about South Africa, and the issues at stake is that the people are complaining that even jobs in the informal sector are being stolen by migrants. And this is what is causing some of the crises there. And in every country it is like that. Mostly immigration is for specialized jobs, rather that the people themselves have chosen not to do, rather than for jobs in the informal sector. And this is what Hutchins helps us to bridge that gap and to create a balance between those two sectors, the formal and the informal sector. Also, Hutchins helps us to engage the excesses of over specialization, speeding up innovation in areas needed to quickly save lives. Okay? One of the things that when we look at what people like Bill Gates, people like Elon Musk, what they've been able to achieve in those sectors they're involved in is to eliminate over-specialization. And in removing over-specialization, they've been able to hasten development and really save a lot of lives, resources, and create millions and millions of jobs. Okay, we see this in the computing sector, and this was a very important factor in the computer revolution, and also in the current space race, and in the development of electric vehicles. So this is so important, and Hutchins helps us to do this, his own philosophy. This vital balance is needed to provide for generations and to do away with bad leadership that leads to the creation of professional and political cults that hijack the polity for personal and parochial tribal gains. Of course, in the previous video I talked about this, about Nigeria, and of course in one of my articles online you will see me talking very clearly about this, that in the lifespan of Nigeria we have faced a situation where tribal groups have effectively hijacked government parastatals, government institutions for their own parochial desires to emancipate their own people. And this is the very foundation of corruption in Nigeria. This is the very foundation of corruption in Nigeria. This is what has become endemic in the Nigerian polity and has really destroyed development, as it were. And we're getting very difficult to remove that mentality from the people. And because they cannot understand this. They understand first the language of food today and not visionary leadership, which engineering helps us to achieve. And that is why that is one of the issues in the Nigerian polity. So we will, having looked at this, we will stop at this point and still go ahead to look at how Dewey affected Nigeria and its economy. So this is just what I want us to see here. The theology of leadership helps us to understand and to be able to understand which professions should be given priority, which aspects of our life should be given priority. And when we treat education, the way we treat education determines how we will do this. If we treat education as something that provides for our entire lives and not just for jobs, we will treat it differently, and it will affect everything we do, from how we run our country to how we treat everything we do, how we run our finances, everything we do from day to day. I am David Chinke for you in Searching the Heart today.